2025 has been the year of David Lynch and Jane Austen. In Lynch's case, sadly, his work has come to the forefront of pop culture once again due to his death a few days before his 79th birthday in January. For Austen, who died 2 centuries ago, the celebration is more unambiguously cheerful, commemorating her 250th birthday on December 16th. The dark eccentricity and hypnotic dreaminess of the turn-of-the-millennium American film director may seem worlds apart from the witty romance and wry social commentary of the Regency-era British novelist. But long before being linked by this fateful year, both artists were regularly celebrated side by side on the Manners and Madness podcast, which began in 2019. One of the hosts, Maya Adkins, was a longtime fan of Lynch and Austen going in. The other, Christian Cabrera, was a newcomer to both. In the past 6 years, they've covered not only the majority of Lynch's films and Austen's novels, but the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks, numerous Austen adaptations, a variety of related films and other media, and quite a few unrelated, or are they, films in frequent side episodes. As a newcomer to Austen myself, having recently read and watched adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, and currently about 10 chapters into Northanger Abbey, I had as much fun discussing her work with them as I did discussing the more frequent topics on this podcast. We're even able to find some fascinating points of contact between the two, Lynch and Austen, some of which I've featured in this public part of the discussion, while others are reserved for listeners on the $5 a month patron tier, which hosts the even longer back section of this episode. Unfortunately, there were several technical issues with my audio, so the quality is not as good on my end as it usually is, but the guests should sound fine, and hopefully it's not too distracting. But before I get into my conversation with these guests, let me offer some updates on my work in the past several months, since my summer bonus episode of Twin Peaks Conversations with Mike Miley, author of David Lynch's American Dreamscapes. Since then, on Patreon, I've offered the $1 a month tier advances of upcoming work. One cracking into the top entries of my Twin Peaks character series, actually the 10th entry, so cracking into the top 10, in terms of screen time, and several others previewing scripts for upcoming video essay narrations, one on Americana in Twin Peaks, and also on different characters in Citizen Kane, Bernstein, and Leland. This is a resumption of the long-dormant Mirrors of Kane series, which began in 2016 and hasn't been seen since 2021, but which I hope to wrap up for the public for the film's 85th anniversary next year. As for the $5 a month tier, in addition to the rest of this conversation, I've also published the transcript of a lengthy discussion with Riley McDonald on the Star Wars series Andor, as well as a couple Film and Focus podcasts episodes on compliance and The Damned, both of which were chosen by patrons in polls. These will be the last polls for a while, but they've been going on for the past couple years, allowing patrons to choose what I'll cover. But in a few weeks, I'll offer a written reflection on the state of different generations in America. This is a December bonus that I offer every year. And after that, both of these tiers will offer advances of upcoming public work, in addition to extensive non-public archives that anybody signing up for the Patreon will receive, rather than doing any new long-term exclusive coverage. This will help me focus on finally accomplishing some major goals with as few distractions as possible. So going forward in 2026, I will work to conclude the aforementioned Mirrors of Kane videos, followed by the 3 big Twin Peaks projects that have hovered on my horizon for a half-decade or more. Season 2 of the Lost in Twin Peaks podcast, the last 9 entries of the Twin Peaks character series, and the location and theme-focused chapters of Journey Through Twin Peaks Part 6, wrapping up my most popular and extensive body of work, which I began in 2014. For now, however, before we get to those big destinations, one more detour for 2025, down the long, winding road that both links and separates 2 towering artists, David Lynch and Jane Austen. Without further ado, let me introduce the hosts of Manners and Madness. So I wanted to welcome Maya Adkins and Christian Cabrera to Twin Peaks Conversations. These guests are unique because we're not just going to be discussing the world of David Lynch and Twin Peaks, but the other topic, the other half of their show, so to speak, which is Jane Austen. So to start off with, I think the question on everybody's mind, what brought you to bring those 2 very disparate creators together? I think back in, was it 2019 or 2018 that you started this?
Yeah, 2019, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They just were my favorites. I wanted to do a podcast, and I kept looking at, like, what's underrepresented, and I kind of felt like Jane Austen was underrepresented, and so I roped Christian into it. And then, it didn't take very long for me to go, maybe we should just throw in like David Lynch as so that we can do something completely different sometimes. And then it was like, no, let's just do both of them equally. And that's how it happened.
Now, when you guys started that approach, had you already started recording some of the episodes just on Jane Austen, or was it kind of in the planning phase that you decided to combine them?
It was in the planning phase. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to say, what would the show be called if it was just Jane Austen? Because Manners and Madness is such a great title for the two of them.
Yeah, that one just came to me in a flash. I'm either really good at naming things or really bad.
I mean, the alliteration is perfect. So, but, yeah, I imagine maybe the Manners podcast. It wouldn't have quite the same ring to it.
No.
No, a lot less to cover too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Christian, I know in your case you were new to both of them.
Yes.
What were your initial impressions, I guess, both of each of them, but also of how you saw them maybe balancing each other out, or was there a different pace at which you got into each of them as you watched them?
I would say sort of. In my high school experience, never touched on Pride and Prejudice or any of the Jane Austen books. I was in a program that was I think it was like the IB program, very international. I kind of came into Jane Austen, at least. I feel like she's sort of the standard for period piece. I feel like she sort of is everyone goes to. And at the time, 2019, I was probably like 25. And I just was a little bit prepared to maybe be a little bit not bored by the books, but not be as excited as I ended up being, just because of preconceived notions of who I thought Jane Austen was and what I thought the books were going to be. And they ended up being a lot more funny, a lot more exciting, and touching on topics that we're obviously still talking about today, which I thought made it more interesting. Also, for David Lynch, I had a little bit of a taste of David Lynch's work before we got started. I think I watched maybe the first 2 episodes of Twin Peaks with my partner, who is also a David Lynch fan, and he had been watching at the time The Return, and so I had seen just bits and pieces of The Return, and that was sort of my jump into David Lynch, which was a little bit intimidating, just because especially The Return visually is just so avant-garde, so over the top, and now that I know it's quintessential David Lynch, it just felt a little intimidating to get into. But once you take that first step, and I think it was when we got through Eraserhead, it started to really make sense to me. Feelings coming into it, that's kind of how I felt. And they ended up really balancing each other out. I think they do a really good job of complimenting each other and then talking about different things at the same time.
Most of the listeners will know my story with David Lynch, but with Jane Austen, that's more of a recent development. Similarly to you, Kristen, never read them in school. I was aware of Pride and Prejudice. I think almost more so Sense and Sensibility and Emma growing up in the 90s. There were some major adaptations of that, in theaters at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the same sort of experience with Pride and Prejudice, where I started reading. I'm like, oh, this is really funny. I'm laughing out loud. That was kind of a delight to discover for me. Now, Maya, you'd been familiar with these artists, obviously, much longer. They were your favorites already. What was your journey into, I guess, Jane Austen, David Lynch, and which one came first, out of curiosity?
David Lynch came first because when I was 12, the series came out, and my mom wanted me to watch it. So that's when I became obsessed with it.
Cool,
it became my favorite show ever. And I did read Pride and Prejudice in high school, but it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I started I think I got the BBC box set from the 80s with all the adaptations. And then I just started reading the books and watching all the adaptations, and it just became my comfort shows and my comfort reads. So I could just reread them over and over and over again, which is important for a podcast. And
You're right.
Prior to just recording a podcast where you want to talk about the things you're excited about, and those two things happen to come together, had you ever kind of made a connection or drawn a connection between them in the past?
No, I hadn't. And so I was really delighted when we started doing the podcast and I started finding connections between them. And now we can watch anything and connect it to both of them.
Yeah, right. Because I should say you do watch other movies and take in some other media as well.
Yeah.
Do you tend to structure it based on where you're kind of interested in going next, or is there more of a method to your approach in terms of how you're going through her works and his works independently and also balanced with one another?
There's a little bit of a method. At the beginning, I was trying to, well, when we were reading the books, I wanted to start like with the earliest book that she had written and go through that way. I also have like a little thing in my mind where certain books I feel like should be kind of read back to back so that you can compare them. It's really more of a feeling. Like I didn't want to do the best adaptations at the beginning. I just wanted to do like good ones, but like just to like whet Christian's appetite. It was more all about how do I get Christian to love this?
Making my way through Northanger Abbey a little bit this morning as I was kind of picking it up and trying to see how far I could get before we recorded, because it's been slow, unfortunately, my reading access or time to read. But reminding myself, kind of reacquainting myself with that world, I was reminded how subtle Jane Austen is in a way that, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but not the quality itself, but that kind of ironic sensibility, not in a sarcastic way, but like almost dramatic irony or kind of playing with the audience's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They remind me of each other in the sense that like Jane Austen will present you with a character and she'll have the protagonist think of them or say or engage with them a certain way. And if you read it on that surface, it's a certain, like I was telling Maya in our emails, like, I'm not sure yet what I think of her friend. And now I'm far enough in that I'm like, oh, this friend.
Right.
She never tells you that. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
She just lets the dialogue be a counterpoint to the way that the character is saying, well, she must be my friend because this, that. And you're like, you kind of have to do the work yourself of paying attention to the social cues and things like that. With Lynch, it's a different dynamic, but it's that similar idea of like things will be a certain way. And then as you kind of progress into the story, obviously Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet are the famous examples. Like you'll pull back the surface and look at it. But even in the more dreamlike aspects, I feel like there's almost like another level to it where something can seem kind of random and surreal for its own sake, and then you hook into like an emotional cue. So there's this, even though they're both in some ways somewhat broad artists in that, they have these kind of larger than life characters at times, and they're playing with very archetypal situations. Like they both, I think, have that similar nuance in their work that I really appreciate, both in terms of like the character dynamics, but also just stylistically.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my very, cursory with Jane Austen knowledge, kind of way into seeing some similarities. But I'm really curious for you guys, having done so much work at this point, what are some of the things that have come out that connect these two worlds for you? Besides, I know you mentioned the humor, but also, I guess, dramatically and maybe even aesthetically in a strange, unexpected way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, what you were saying before made me think of how I feel like they both trust their audience, to fill in the gaps. David Lynch never famously gives any answers. And I mean, obviously, Jane Austen can't give us answers at this point, but a lot of her characters were based on the society at the time, and she just assumed everyone would know. So from this perspective, from our perspective, there's a lot that we kind of have to infer. But I love how universal it is, even though it was from an earlier time period. I feel like a lot of what, like, just the emotions and the way people act are all very similar to how they act now. They both love happy endings, so
They do.
Surprisingly,
in their own way.
Right. Yeah, I think kind of to build on that, like they know their audience. I also feel like for people, it almost feels like in a way they prepared for people who didn't initially get it to like for it to be enjoyable enough for them to want to come back to it and sort of try and understand it, whether that's doing research on your own or just looking for details in the work itself. They kind of really, both in a way, whether it's intentional or not, promote the idea of like studying art. And I think that's something that I really love about both of them is, you can come back, you can focus on one aspect of it, or even if it's like, especially with David Lynch stuff, if you're just trying to understand it, rewatching it is sort of the key towards understanding it, like just absorbing it and focusing on different things and maybe even doing outside research if you're that dedicated. I feel like it's like they almost encourage learning like innately, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. One other thing is their approach to character, because they both write in a way they're kind of very complex, but also two-dimensional at the same time, the kinds of characters that they write. They never, even though they both love happy endings, they never really are unrealistic about, like, the bad guy doesn't always lose. And,
Good point.
they have a real similar way of approaching characters. And it feels like they kind of love all their characters, even if they're writing them to be bad, they just feel connected.
I was going to say, when you mentioned both of you were talking about that aspect of how they encourage the readers to, or the viewers to engage, it reminds me of this quote I love from Martha Nachemson, who wrote a couple books about David Lynch, Passion of David Lynch and David Lynch Swerves. And one time when she was kind of interviewing him or accompanying him somewhere, they went to, I think, a museum, and they were looking at this abstract work of art. And she was looking at it and getting kind of perplexed and frustrated. She said, I don't get it. I don't understand this. He said, yes, you do. Your eyes are moving. Like, you're there, you're in the work. Whatever your brain is processing, like, you're taking it in. Something is happening in the work. And I always kind of love that quote. It's just a little peek under the hood of how David Lynch approaches art, I guess.
I think that's something that, as I've gotten older, like, I just recently took a trip to Boston. My partner had a work conference, and I had a couple days to myself, so I went to the Institute for Contemporary Art, and a lot of it is very abstract, very, what people would probably consider like modernist pieces that are kind of weird and whatever. Not classical art, basically. And I feel like I had a better understanding of how to go about interpreting them. Not how to interpret them, but to, like, the process of it. And I think that's kind of what David Lynch really, his goal was with the way he created his art, was, like, it's not about understanding it. It's about knowing the process of beginning to understand it in your own way. There was no single understanding of any piece of art. It's learning how it, your own life experiences or your own interpretations of certain things, even as simple as color, lead you on a journey to understand what the artist is maybe saying and how you're receiving that.
Yeah, I think you can say that about pretty much any art, and you could definitely say that about Jane Austen in its way. It's not too surrealistic or anything like that, but I feel like any book, when you read it at one point in your life, you might, connect with a certain character, and then you read it again and you're like, what's wrong with that character? So I feel like all art is kind of it lives with you, and as you experience more, it changes in your viewpoint.
So I'm curious now to go in the opposite direction from looking at the universe of Lynch and the universe of Austen, all the things they have in common. What's your favorite Austen book and your favorite Lynch work so far? And also, since this is a Twin Peaks specific podcast, your favorite either episode and or, section. Maya, in your case, I'm curious, has that changed since the podcast began?
Well, famously, my favorite book changes with every book we read. But,
right, of course. Fair enough, as you said, yeah.
But we did just finish Mansfield Park, and I went into the podcast thinking Mansfield Park was my favorite, and at the moment, it is still my favorite. So I just really like that one. It's rarely anyone's favorite, but Yeah, especially after having just read it very closely, the psychological exploration that she does in that book, it's just so interesting. And yeah, so that's my favorite, and I really like, we haven't done it yet, the 1980s adaptation of that one. But I would say there's only 2 Northanger Abbey adaptations. I love both of them. I can't pick a favorite. I'm just going to list them all if I try to pick a favorite.
Favorite for this and the favorite for that.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole last
Each
year
one,
of our
it's like a
podcast
kid. Each one
will
gets an
just be-
award.
Exactly.
Right.
As far as David Lynch goes, I really love Lost Highway. It's one of those movies that it's like, I will watch it and be like, oh, I 100% understand it. And then I'll watch it again and be like, nope, don't understand it at all. And then I watch it again and I'm like, oh, now it makes total sense. So it just goes back and forth. And I really like that aspect of it. Of course, Mulholland Drive is great. I haven't actually watched Inland Empire yet. That's the next big David Lynch that we're doing.
Sure.
And
Exciting,
I decided to just, once we started the podcast, I was like, I'm just going to wait until we get to it before I watch it.
You might as well, yeah.
Well, and Fire Walk with Me, of course, has always been a big favorite. Like when I went and got the video cassettes of Twin Peaks back in the day and watched it a million times and made everyone I know watch it. We watched Fire Walk with Me a lot, and it's just so good. Actually, my favorite thing that in the Twin Peaks side that we've done that has been a surprise to me since we started the podcast was The Secret History of Twin Peaks, because when I read it before we'd started doing the podcast, I just kind of bounced off of it a lot. And I don't know if it's just because I listened to it or what, but reading it for the podcast was just, was from the first page, I was like, let me look up every single reference in this book. And I still think about like some of the stuff in there. It's just, I found it really interesting, even though technically I guess that would be Mark Frost, but
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously with Jane Austen, you have the literary and the audio-visual, where they're the adaptations, but you do have that as well with Twin Peaks, and even Lynch as well. I know you covered Angriest Dog in the World comic. I think some of his memoirs and books and stuff.
yeah.
So it's interesting that with both artists, you can have, their primary work, one being literary, one being audiovisual, but then kind of crisscross it there as well and have a little of the other category in there.
Yeah.
And in a sense that Secret History would be a favorite because that's such a portrait of society in a way that almost, I guess, I don't know. You know what it is? Another Lynch work that kind of has that quality, and it's not so much because of him, again, in that case either, is Dune.
Yeah.
Very strong, that he created. So it's interesting that you can find that kind of that cross current. So I guess, Christian, with you, what would be your answers to those questions?
I would say for Jane Austen, so far I would say my favorite is probably Pride and Prejudice. For a while it was Persuasion. I really liked the maturity aspect of her writing. I liked the introspective. I feel like it was probably mirroring a time of my life where I was a little more introspective, so it kind of fit in better. But I feel after reading Pride and Prejudice, there's a reason it's the most popular. It is it feels like when you're reading it, very easily to become fully engrossed in the story. It feels almost like you knowingly are reading a masterpiece. There's just something about it that it makes sense, and you are easily ready to accept anything that comes from it. So I really enjoyed it, and the story it sort of permeates a lot of art nowadays. And people use that trope all the time. So it just feels like the perfect love story, and kind of just really resonated with me. And I would say for David Lynch, I always have a special spot for Blue Velvet. I feel like I know Mulholland Drive is his masterpiece, his best work, but in my opinion, Blue Velvet always, there's something so magical about it. It's just the darkness visually and the story, but there's just something about the look of it that feels so dreamy. It feels so otherworldly, and that was sort of the first time where I was seeing his work like meshing the real world with the dream world in that way, where it just made sense that they could exist together, which I feel like is what he's trying to say with a lot of his work. So it made me kind of understand him better. And, Isabella Rossellini is, the best. And I would say, like, as far as Twin Peaks, my favorite part, because I'm so bad with like episodes and remembering like specific episode stuff. I really love the tail end of season 2, even though, it feels like as we get through the show, it feels less Lynch and Frost, just because of, studio execs and all that stuff. There is something exciting about like the pickup where you're like, okay, we're going straight into the Black Lodge, the supernatural aspects of it, and like the whole native history that ties into it. It's just the mythology of it is so interesting to me, and I love the mythology of a show where it feels weird, it feels a little untouchable, and then as you start to slowly get the pieces, you can really start to discover where it's going and what it's trying to say.
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to Nadine because I forgot to say her before. And I want to also say Christian is probably going to love Emma the best when we get to it, though. I just have a feeling.
I do. There is something about Emma adaptations that are always the most enjoyable to me. I really like Emma the character because she feels so unlike any other Jane Austen heroine. She's so sure of herself. She doesn't really self-doubt. It's usually, at least in the adaptations we watch, she's just so confident and doesn't really... It feels like she is the one who's controlling the book, which usually other adaptations and stories feel like the heroines are being guided, by the narrator or by the characters around them. Emma is just such this singular, interesting heroine that I'm really excited to read that book.
Now, as far as the characters go, again, I've only read Pride and Prejudice so far, so a little limited. But I want to throw this out there, and I'm going to say it in kind of a maybe a glib way, but like you can interpret it more, suggest like, who does this character evoke, or what are some interesting unexpected similarities. So don't mind the way I'm phrasing it, but so let's start off with, who is the Agent Cooper of Jane Austen's works?
Oh, gosh. That's a hard one.
Jeopardy theme playing now. I guess you'd have to answer it with a who is the agent. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Well, in a way, you could say Catherine Morland from Northanger Abbey.
That's
She wants to investigate some mysteries in the book. She's definitely got the innocence. And, she doesn't have the experience that Cooper has.
No.
But she's definitely down to explore life's darker aspects.
Oh, that's fascinating.
She's not like, I think like there are moments where she, is a little bit afraid of her ideas of people or situations, but in a way she sort of enters them fearlessly, kind of how Cooper does. And I feel like she has, mostly because she's so young and her naivete, she's got this sort of black and white view of the world. And she's sort of learning. And I kind of, collate that with Cooper's understanding of supernatural forces. He's coming in not really, knowing much about Black Lodge, White Lodge, all that kind of stuff. And he's sort of learning as he goes and kind of teaching us in the process.
Being about a quarter of the way into Northanger Abbey, I'm very curious about this aspect. Because other than the novel they're discussing, it hasn't really come up yet. But, you mentioned to me it has a gothic element to it. And that's not something I would ever have associated with Jane Austen. So I'm so keen to see her. I could almost say like Jane Austen tiptoeing into like the Bronte world or something, maybe. I don't know. I love Wuthering Heights, so I'd be excited to see that. And so another, along those same lines, who is the Laura Palmer of Jane Austen's world?
Oh, gosh.
I think for me, it's a Lizzie Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. Because I feel like Laura is sort of she feels like a character who's sort of teaching us about the world in David Lynch's universe. And she's sort of letting people know that there is no such thing, and from like an American lens, this idea of like a typical American family, that kind of thing, it doesn't exist. It's, everyone is sort of balanced by the dark and the good, and Lizzie is sort of learning about the world herself, and has these aspects of herself that, I think we found that were like, not great aspects. She's very judgmental. She's very, very, not cynical. I think that's too harsh of a word, but I think she is a realist, where she sort of understands how the world works and kind of hasn't realized yet how to work the world in a way that works for her. She kind of lets the world sort of dictate until you get further into the story, and she starts maturing and realizing, and I don't think Laura was ever given that opportunity, but I think she had the same skill set to do that.
I have a different perspective that I'm going to say Mary Crawford from Mansfield Park, because she was very knowledgeable about the world. She didn't have the best upbringing. She was a little too smart for her own good, a little too worldly for her own good, self-defeating in a way, and definitely put upon by the men in her life. And yeah, cynical. I mean, not that I would say that Laura is necessarily cynical, but she definitely has. So
Qualities.
yeah, I'm gonna say Mary Crawford.
Nice.
Interesting.
Who is the Mr. Darcy of David Lynch's world?
I feel like James wants to see himself as the Mr. Darcy so bad, because I don't know. We, especially on our podcast, we are not fans of James. We think he's very much like a tryhard. But I feel like the actual Mr. Darcy, that one's a really hard one, because there are so many like angsty people to choose from, which I feel like is a very Darcy quality.
I want to say,
Do you have one, Maya? I'm like ruminating.
my first thought was, and this is definitely not him in personality type, but just like maybe Nicolas Cage from Wild at Heart.
I was just thinking that. Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Like not
one.
repressed.
Yeah.
Letting more of the wild side out.
Yeah, just like the passion that is
Yeah.
deep under, the Darcy
Yeah.
has the passion, it's just hiding inside. So it's hard to think of who David Lynch has, who's like, I mean, maybe Blue Velvet, Kyle MacLachlan's character, what's his name?
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey. Maybe a little bit of Jeffrey, but I would say maybe a combination of the two. Sailor
I
and
love
Jeffrey.
the Nicolas Cage idea, yeah, because there's something like endearingly earnest about Mr. Darcy that there definitely is about Sailor and Sailor Ripley and Wild, where they're both like, as you said, almost like opposite characters in terms of personality, but they're both like kind of like vulnerably sincere in some way.
Yes.
Winsome in very different ways. So I like that. Yeah, you articulated that well. Made me, because I was thinking the same thing, but I couldn't quite think why. And you got, great. All right, I love it.
Yeah, I love the Jeffrey from Blue Velvet is a good one, because I feel like there's an aspect to Darcy, especially towards the middle of the story, where he has this savior complex. Where he feels like he needs to rescue Lizzie from her situation because of his interpretation of it. And I feel like Jeffrey has a little bit of that, where it's a little bit of a different situation, where Isabella Rossellini's character is like actively in a violent, dangerous situation, but in a way, intervening very kind of haphazardly in those situations can put that person more at risk. And I feel like Jeffrey kind of had this idea. He's like, I'm going to save this woman because I love her. And she's in this bad situation, and I can get her out. And I feel like that's such a Darcy quality.
And now, as I think about this, another one interesting one might be, and this obviously turns out much worse, but there's almost a quality to him that reminds me of Diane slash Betty in Mulholland Drive.
I, I was thinking the same
Mm.
thing, although I was thinking
Yeah.
maybe more of a Wickham or a Willoughby. Willoughby. I
Well,
think she's
yeah,
a
the negative
Willoughby.
aspects
The
for
two
sure.
parts of her personality together.
But like the part that reminds me of him is just the like kind of like I don't know, he's an interesting combination of these different contrasts. Kind of, he comes off, it almost is in reverse because initially he seems more like this Diane, this cynical, jaundiced person who is
Yeah.
pulled back from everyone, can't intermingle. Like his scene at the dance is almost like her scene at the party. But then as it goes along, you see him more almost kind of naive and, you know, good natured and wanting, not quite, you know, in a almost a Betty way of kind of
Yeah.
wanting to be a good person and not, you know, having a mastery of the world yet or something. So yeah, I love that. Okay, this is great. Now, and so the last one I was going to ask is, and you actually kind of already, well, Christian, you answered in a way because you flipped it. Who is the Lizzie Bennett of David Lynch's world?
To me, I would say Audrey or maybe Donna. Because I mean, I would say maybe Audrey, just like the spunkiness. But I don't think that Lizzie is quite as well, I don't know.
Well,
Say put Lizzie in the situation.
yeah, I was going to say, I would
See.
say she's not as reckless.
That's true.
There are some times she is kind of reckless in that
Yeah.
book in very different ways.
Well, and Donna can be kind of reckless too. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say maybe a little more on the Audrey side, but a little bit of Donna in there.
Now I am gonna put in a request tab for this of do a whole comparison episode now because I'm thinking who's the Wickham, who's the Lydia, who's the
Yeah.
just
Oh,
Pride.
yeah, we
that's
talk
just
about
Pride and
that.
Prejudice. No, I know you've got some elements of that already in there. So with Twin Peaks specifically, that's kind of a thread running throughout your podcast because I think you began covering season 1. Was it 2020 or 2019 even, like before
Yeah,
COVID?
it was pretty early. We did the first season, and then I think because we were lining them up with the books at first, and I believe we did the second season in 2 chunks, partially just to spread it out.
That makes sense.
And partially
It does.
because I want Christian to experience the experience of how I experienced Twin Peaks, which was long delays.
Live TV.
And then season 3 you haven't covered yet, right?
I've seen like pieces of it, just like short clips, and I think at the time my partner was watching it, I might have been in like school, so I was doing homework, and he was watching something that I had no interest in watching because I didn't have a pretext for Twin Peaks, and just watching those little clips, I didn't really like stay watching it just because it seemed so far out of my understanding of like I don't know what's going on. I don't know any of these characters, or not that I don't think really matters, kind of knowing what I know now, but it kind of does. But that was my only experience, was these like little short clips and people talking about like certain scenes. Like I remember the nuclear bomb scene. Like that's sort of something I remember, and I like can see the clip in my head real quick, but I had no experience of the storyline or kind of any other characters in the show. So it's going to be pretty fresh.
Very interesting. Okay. Do you feel like there's a similar experience at all to coming back and dipping into the Twin Peaks world, after these breaks? And obviously it's a little different because you're getting the same story beats over again, but coming in with this adaptation of a Jane Austen and coming back a year later with a different one of that same Jane Austen novel, does it feel a little bit like that, almost like you're coming back into a world and the characters in a similar way? Or are they very different phenomena?
I find them to be very similar, just because to me, I always see Jane Austen stories as like a single universe. I feel like they could very easily coexist with each other. Same rules, same societal expectations. So it feels very much like once you get into the world of it and kind of learn what the rules are and what the expectations are, which is probably why it was a great idea to do Northanger Abbey first, because that protagonist, she's the youngest of all the protagonists, so she's sort of getting a a quick lesson in how society works, and which is good for the reader to understand. So you kind of come back in, you're like, all right, I know the rules. Like, what are going to be the stipulations for this story? Who's going to be, the one in charge? Who's going to be, the bad guy? That kind of thing. So it does feel very similar, where you're coming back to very familiar people, because people, I feel like, are individuals, but like when you're representing a society as a whole, you kind of go back to tropes, to what's the word, like cliches of people, because I think once people start to be grouped in mass, they sort of fall back into those kind of tropes.
So with Twin Peaks, obviously the thing you're getting somewhat different. I mean, it actually happens a surprising amount in season 1 and 2, given how I think it's a 40-day period that whole
Oh yeah.
storyline takes place in. But you're getting so many changes, falls and stuff. And I will say, with the return, obviously you know enough to know you're going to get a lot of that 25 years later. That's an interesting difference that come to think of it, where with the Austen adaptations, you're coming back and you're getting to return to this point, but see it from a different angle. Although you just made is good as well. Like starting with Northanger Abbey and reading these books throughout and seeing in that way, even though they're different characters, you're also getting that progression. So,
And you kind of get to see Jane Austen growing up, because I mean, she wrote Northanger Abbey when she was like 17, and Persuasion when she was like almost 40. So you can definitely see the progression of the characters and what they want. You can definitely see the maturity and like the realism of the world.
Right. And maybe like I would never say she had like rose colored lenses, but just, I think as you read more, like the tone of Persuasion is so different than the tone of Northanger Abbey. You can tell, like in Persuasion, she's focusing on an older storyline with an older heroine who has gone through life and maybe has experienced kind of all that life has to bring, and maybe more so the more depressive parts that kind of form that personality. So I feel like that's been probably one of my favorite things, is reading these in this order and kind of seeing Jane Austen going through and what's important to her in this story, and kind of using it as a reflection of, what was important during the time. What are people talking about in Regency England? So it's been really interesting.
Yeah, and the villains especially, you can see it because like in Sense and Sensibility, the villains are so villainous, and it's chock full of them. And then by the time you get to Persuasion, or even Emma, Mansfield Park especially, which is the last one we read, the villains are all so complicated that they're practically anti-heroes in their own way. They're not just like 2D villainous characters.
Yeah, it's like she got to experience more of society and meet people, and that like the length of time she spent analyzing people and just watching them and seeing how people move about the world, like it really develops this idea that I feel like her and David Lynch both have, where it's like, no one's 100% good, 100% evil. Everybody's a mix, and everyone is really the perception of them being good or bad is really driven on how they are being presented to you. Because you look at some of the villains from like Persuasion and Mansfield Park, and like you understand why they're doing this, and you understand, especially like a woman in a Jane Austen novel who's a villain, you understand why she's driven to be this way, because there are like very minimal options. So it's like, how many choices does she have? How can I blame her for acting this way when she's just trying to survive? And you could say the same for probably many David Lynch villains.
It just occurred to me, David Lynch's favorite slogan, in a way, could apply to Jane Austen as well, which was "A woman in trouble." I think line for Inland Empire. So
Right.
different versions of that in a way. Speaking of villains, you had a fun episode recently where you ranked the villains, and you were switching back and forth between Lynch and Austen. And I encourage everyone, to listen to all of your show, but that one in particular, I'll highlight in the show notes. You talked about coming at Lynch in particular, and Austen as well, from these sort of different generational lenses. Like, What was it that brought you guys together in the first place? When Christian, you hadn't yet seen Austen and Lynch. Like, what was your? Did you have like another piece of media that you guys connected over before that, or did that like what segued into this project? I
I think so I met Maya through my partner, and they both met through theater. They had done a lot of live theater together, both very active in the local theater scene, and just artists in general. And I feel like that is how we all came together. We discussed art and we discussed theater mainly at first, just because at the time I was also very new to theater. I didn't go out and watch plays or musicals or anything. And after meeting my partner, realized I really loved them. And so we just we would have these weekends where we'd go to Maya's house and we'd just hang out and talk about shows and theater and all these things. And, Twin Peaks kept coming up, cause, they both love Twin Peaks, and, it kind of just snowballed from there where, I was like, well, I feel like I should watch Twin Peaks since they talk about it so much. And, it just kind of grew from there.
And when we, like a few years before we started the podcast, I started listening to podcasts, and I was cleaning pools at the time. So I would listen to a lot of podcasts all day long. And I was just like, I love podcasts. I want to do a podcast. And I think I introduced Christian to podcasts, or I recommended a lot at the beginning of his podcast listening. And I think we did a lot of connecting about podcasts. So it just felt natural to be like, you want to do a podcast with me?
Yeah. It's something, I never really, I don't know. It just never seemed something that I could do in a way, like podcast. Like it feels like music where it just feels so like, I just don't understand how to create it, but I could really enjoy absorbing it. And so podcasting felt like, almost like, well, what do I have to say? And, just given that opportunity, I was like, oh yeah, it's fun. It's, it's quote unquote art in its own way.
Yeah. So Maya, in your case, one of the things I love about this podcast is you described it, Christian, as like a collaboration, but there is also kind of a guiding aspect to it, because you've seen all this work, you've experienced most of it, other than Inland Empire, I guess, some of the adaptations here and there. But what has it been like for you to set up this guided tour, this kind of like mentored look through, like, here's the work I loved, now I'm gonna like bring you into that world? Like, has that been kind of a unique experience for you, or is it an extension of kind of, I guess, how you've always approached art and theater specifically and all of that?
Well, it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed trying to make sure that I introduce it to him in a way that he's not gonna like bounce off of it, and but I will say, I do feel like I have introduced Twin Peaks, at least like in my 20s, to everyone I knew at some point. I love listening to people talk about the things that they love, and I love telling people about the things that I love. And so I guess kind of it's a little bit of a natural desire in me to do something like that, but it's been really special to do it with Christian, and to like really feel like our friendship has gotten so much closer through doing it. And I love you, Christian.
Yeah, I feel like I liked how you used the mentorship kind of analogy, because I feel like we are, in a way, very interesting complementary zodiac signs.
Okay, yeah. I know you do that at the end of every episode. I'm learning about zodiac through the characters of Twin Peaks and Jane Austen.
Yeah, we haven't done that in a while.
I feel like
we need to do that again.
Yeah, I was like, we need to pick that back up. But it's just such an interesting way to look at people, to incorporate that. And I feel like, our zodiac signs are so, like, I feel like Maya is very innately a person who is like, when she understands something, like, she understands it and she's going to relate it to you in the way she understood it. And I am just, as a Sagittarius, very like naturally like, no, let me understand it and kind of want to experience it for myself. But then, it's just been a very good, like, natural mentor kind of relationship in a way. And I do look at Maya as being sort of like the person who has the knowledge of David Lynch and Jane Austen works. And I always ask questions to her. I don't ever like really look them up, just because she feels like she's so comfortable with them, and it has been in that world for so long that it feels like she has the knowledge, and I feel like she does.
Well, and you've caught up to me.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, that's the perfect segue. I was just going to say, there's a fun thing with intro casts where somebody's bringing somebody into a world where at a certain point, they feel like the kind of relationship to the work adapts and grows to the point where they feel like they're both, I wouldn't say like equally whatever, because you're still learning things as you go, but like there's a sense in which they're both kind of experts on that thing. And you get to listen to a intro cast as it progresses. Like Twin Peaks Unwrapped was the same way, where it starts off and what is this? I don't know. Explain this to me. But then by the end, it's like the two of them are as conversant as anybody.
Yeah.
That whole process unfold. It's really fun.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed that aspect, like as we've gotten more comfortable and done more stuff, just like I guess I don't notice it as much in the moment, but when I'm going back and editing the podcast, I'm always like, Christian made some really great points.
Well, and I feel like I've done this podcast as I've like gone through. I mean, I started it in my mid-20s and sort of did that aspect of my life of everyone's life is very like I feel like you're learning a lot about the world around you, and you're going through very pivotal moments in your life, and so kind of bringing that aspect into it, it feels like I've sort of in a way grown up with the podcast, as far as like this like maturation into your 30s, which feels sort of like their finalized mature voice, or at least for me at least. It just feels like in a way that it's been a natural progression.
Yeah, and it's great as someone who has more experience to have someone with fresh eyes come in and give you new perspectives. It's kind of like watching an adaptation, it's like you're getting a different perspective on something that you love, so you're thinking about it a different way and finding new ways to appreciate it.
And even just with Jane Austen and David Lynch, that was one thing I wanted to ask you guys. This has been kind of a crazy year for that, ups and downs and everything.
Yeah.
For Jane Austen, it's, I think, more straight. She's obviously been dead for over 2 centuries. So the fact that we're celebrating her birth and that it's kind of big thing, 250 years, it's, I think, more purely a positive, exciting thing, and all these new works coming out. I know, listen to your coverage of Miss Austen. So it's funny, I've actually, even having only read Pride and Prejudice and a little bit of Northanger Abbey, I feel like I've gotten all this other Jane Austen. I've seen Becoming Jane, I've seen the Miss Austen, I've listened to some of the episodes you guys did on movies I haven't even seen about Land or these other ones. So I've got all this peripheral Jane Austen stuff, but it's a great year for that. Obviously, books, TV shows. With Lynch, it's obviously more complicated. The big thing is he passed away.
Yeah.
That was such a sad moment for everybody. And I think, everything going on in the world, and the fact that his death seems so closely related in some ways to the fires in LA and climate change and all of this. And it just, so that was kind of a tough beginning. And then at the same time, as always happens when somebody passes away, there's this kind of celebration of their work. So there's been a lot of positive stuff as well. But what has it been like kind of navigating this year, which already just with Lynch would have been complicated, but the fact that it's also, starting in January with his death and ending in December with her birth, it's kind of fascinating,
It was hard when David Lynch died, just, you never know how exactly is the best way to honor someone or to deal with a death. So I think we just kind of, we did like a specific episode, I think, just honoring some of the stuff. And we've kind of just kept on our same schedule. Even the Jane Austen celebration at the end of the year, I haven't really put too much thought into doing something specific for that. I don't know. It's just, you know, I feel like the podcast is so much fun, but it does take work, and I have gotten burned out in the past. So I just try to, like, you know, not stress out about that sort of stuff too much. Just kind of like the podcast will progress as it progresses, and you know, a lot of people find us at different times anyway, so the specific days don't matter as much. So
yeah, I feel like it is like a weird contrast how we're celebrating her birth this year and his death happened this year, and it feels almost like, in a way, like our connection of the two in a way is like inevitable. Like it feels like it just keeps showing itself through the works or through life events, and I feel like, in a way, the celebration of it is really interesting because it feels like, you know, it almost, like, you know, makes people go back and re-explore works. It brings up things and people are like, oh, I didn't think I, like, you know, I forgot I watched this. Let me go back and watch it. And they find something new. And it almost feels purposeful in the way that the universe sort of presents these like occurrences to kind of force you to go back and do probably what they wanted you to do, which is to, like, you know, take in their art, interpret it, kind of, you know, figure out your own feelings about it and how your own feelings about how it reflects the world around you. And I kind of find it very complimentary that both major events happened this year. It feels, I don't know, it just feels very normal. And the whole, like, celebration, our own personal celebration of it was, you know, kind of, in a way, that's kind of, in my opinion, how you honor these types of people is, you know, you have your own personal moment, and then you keep moving forward and keep enjoying their art, keep enjoying their works, and just, you know, doing it how you normally would. It just feels kind of how, almost like they would want it, which might be inferring a lot about them. But I don't think that especially David Lynch would want us to just wallow and be sad about him passing. And it almost would feel like he would be like, kind of shrug and be like, oh, well, I guess I passed.
yeah, you make me think maybe at the end of the year we should do some sort of an episode talking about this year. And yeah.
Well, we're kind of doing it now a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, exactly. And I feel like the honoring part of it is, like, at least for us, it's weekly. Even if we do something that isn't directly created by both of them or inspired both of them, we always, in a way, find the connection back. It feels like maybe our brains are hardwired to be this way.
Even just watching Little Shop of Horrors, we were like, would Jane Austen or David Lynch like this?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it just feels like we honor them every week when we do the podcast, and when we decide to do a new part of their archive, it just feels like it's going to continue going.
Before I ask you some more questions specific about Twin Peaks, Jane Austen, we're going to go into the Patreon section at that point, but I want you to let the listeners to this public part know where they can find you, where they can follow you, where to check out your work, and all of that.
I'll let you do it, Christian.
Yeah.
you always do it.
I always do our contact stuff. Yeah, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, I believe a couple other streaming platforms for podcasts, but we have like a Blue Sky account at Manners and Madness. We have an Instagram at Manners and Madness Pod, and we do have an email address that, you know, people write in when we ask people to kind of give their thoughts on the topic or suggestions or anything like that.
Or mannersandmadness.com.
That's Manners and or that too. Yeah,
it's got all the episodes on there
and
the RSS feed.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. So like mannersandmadness@gmail.com is a good place to reach us. You know, if you have any thoughts or any suggestions, we always love suggestions. So I think we've done a couple viewer suggestions for topics, and it's been really good.
Yeah, every month or two.
The artwork come into it. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that was Maya.
It was I just, you know, wanted Jane Austen and David Lynch. And so I had a friend, Laura Barrel, who did the art for us. And one of Christian's friends did the lettering for the logo.
Yes. Yeah, that's like the cool thing about Jacksonville, where we live, is there's a really vibrant art community here, and they especially like they love doing stuff for friends, and so it's really nice to kind of surround yourself with those people, and they're just really kind.
Yeah.
Nice. It's one of the few corners of the U.S. I feel like Lynch, unless I'm missing something, he never really went to Florida, right? Can you imagine a
Florida
David Lynch film about a
like,
Florida man?
Gosh, it's the Black Lodge, that's Florida. That's why. It's too crazy down there.
Yeah. No, I do love that artwork though. I can almost see these two getting along in that way. Like,
I think they would.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think they would
Yeah, we
appreciate
always
each
say
other's
that.
work. I never, heard David Lynch talk about Jane Austen at all, but I think that he would appreciate her work if he did a deep dive. And I'm pretty sure she would appreciate his.
Mm-hmm. And when I mentioned the picture, you were saying something I didn't want to cut off, but something about every 2 weeks.
Oh, I was going to say once every month or two, we do a check-in episode where we just kind of like talk about what we've covered, just chat, talk about food a lot. And,
Life updates, just kind of casual conversation.
yeah, and talk about any letters or anything we've gotten in for the podcast.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious to hear from both of you what you're expecting or suspecting, let's say, for some of the, less so in Maya's case, but certainly with Christian, some of the stuff that you haven't experienced yet. Start with Christian. I know you've said you've seen some images, some iconography from the return, but you don't really know the story. What are some of the things you are expecting or excited for as you enter that world? And, some of which maybe you'll see and some of which maybe you won't. Where are you coming at it from at this point? And for the rest of this discussion, you can join the $5 a month tier on patreon.com/lostinthemovies. You will hear more in terms of runtime than was in this public part, where we discuss more about Lynch and Austen, the connections between them, do some deep dives into different works, the book I'm reading now, Northanger Abbey, and also what they're anticipating in terms of Lynch stuff that they haven't seen yet. So it's really enjoyable conversation. I had a great time talking to these two. So definitely check that out. And in addition to that, you'll also get the back halves of all of the Twin Peaks Conversations episodes, of which there have been many over the past few years. And you'll get numerous episodes too that have never been released publicly. Some of which are available to the $1 a month tier, some of which are exclusive to the $5 a month tier. So there's a lot to dig into there beyond just, what the current and upcoming rewards are. So hope you take a look at all of that. And definitely check out Manners and Madness. They're a great podcast. And keep track of all the stuff they're discussing with both of these great, accomplished creators.